I think at this point, I'd like to skip over the update because I think we have other business later in the meeting where that can be included. And I want to make sure our guest speakers have a chance to get started reasonably on time. So that's what we're going to do, if that's okay with you, Jean.
Absolutely.
And that way they can go along with the agenda a little bit better, and we'll get the other stuff in at the end. Thank you so much, Sergeant Smith, for all this information. We'll look for you out there. And if you have horses, tell me one day and I'll come take some pictures.
There will be out there every single day. So
every day.
Come on out. Thank you guys so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Good job.
Bye now. Bye.
Okay. John and Jennifer, you're up. I did put out your bios. Did you want to go ahead and introduce them, Catherine?
I would like to do that. One of the things that we do this time of year usually is have an annual meeting of the Siesta Key Association. And in years past, many of you know we've had a great breakfast meeting with great speakers, and all the sheriffs come and some special speakers. And so today we're having that day on the 4th of March. And we have been for some time looking forward to Jon Thaxton. In fact, he was to be our guest speaker last year when we had to cancel this. So we're really glad to have Jon Thaxton back. He is right now the Senior Vice President for the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, which is really a wonderful organization that does so much as a nonprofit, not only for land acquisition and how to make sure we retain the right kinds of things. He works with lots of other nonprofits as well to help what they do. And at this point, he is doing a lot of work with water quality issues. And some of you who've lived here long enough know that Jon Thaxton is a 5-generation Floridian from this area. And he was also a 3-term county commissioner. And we're very grateful to have had his leadership. So I'm going to let Jon take the initiative. And I think, is it Jennifer that's going to go next then, Dr. Shafer? Is that correct?
That's
and
right.
she is also the speaker tonight with him, and they have a program they want to present to you. She's a marine ecologist. Dr. Shafer is also at Shafer Consulting, which does a fair amount of community science research and science policy issues work. And she's been right now part of the director of the Science and Environmental Council of Southwest Florida. I'm reading that because it's more than words than I can remember right now, but she's part of a consortium of more than 40 different community organizations that are working on science-based environmental solutions for water quality in our area. So with that, Jon Thaxton, we're glad to have you. So I'm gonna let you take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think this is the 4th or 5th time that I've had the honor of addressing your association. And so it's almost like homecoming. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, a lot of familiar names that have been on the key and active for quite some time. So thank you so much for the very gracious invitation and this opportunity to present to you the Community Playbook for Clean Waterways, a brand new initiative of the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. And I wanted to just kind of supplement my introduction with, I am actually 4th-generation Sarasotan native. And I was born in the town, or have raised in the town of Osprey. And for those of you timers who remember Osprey in the 1950s and 60s, it was a viable fishing village. So I grew up on my friend's father's commercial fishing boats in the bays and in the Gulf of Mexico. I still live on the water, and I have this very personal relationship to the barrier islands, to the bays, to the Gulf of Mexico. And so to be able to organize an initiative like this was just an opportunity of a lifetime for me. This concept came about several years ago. We were experiencing these incredible red tide outbreaks, which I don't need to, talk to y'all about. You lived it more than almost anyone did. And our board of directors says, what can we do? What can we do to not necessarily specifically address red tide, but what can we do to improve the water quality of our area? And so I remember somebody telling me a year or so before that wouldn't it be a great idea if we got all of these activities and all of this information and all of this data and put it together in one source so that a citizen, a homeowners association, a government official, a policymaker, a teacher, or anyone could go to this source and have at their fingertips all of this information readily accessible. And I thought, wow, that's really a great idea. So I told a couple people about it. And one of the first couple people I told was Jennifer and Dave Shafer. Well, come to find out, Dave reminded me that it was him that gave me that idea in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's funny how these things come full circle. But it is classic Gulf Coast style. It is something that we hope will transform our region through bold and proactive philanthropy. Let me go back one slide, if I could, please, to the one that says our way of life, because I want to, there we go. Because I want to, I'm not driving, we're trying, there we go, right there, that's where I want to be. I don't think there's anything that defines our area, Sarasota, the southwest coast of Florida, more so than our waters. In fact, we have been recognized because of our waterways for things such as having the wild and scenic Mayaca River in our community, the Sarasota Bay National Estuary Program, the only estuary program in the nation that's flanked by 2 estuary programs on both sides. We have designated outstanding Florida waterways and an estuary of national significance. And all that's good. You know, that's a lot of fancy titles and things, but come on, let's get down to brass tacks. If you open up any advertisement of the Sarasota area, I challenge you to find one that does not feature our water and our waterways as the driver that gets people here. I'm sure many of you are living on Siesta Key as a result of this water, more than any other reason. And when it comes to quality of life, it's more than just the biota. It's more than just the organisms, the fish and the seagrasses and things like that. This is the place where we recreate. This is the place where we fish. And this is one of the, if not the top economic driver in our region. So on the next slide, I want to remind everyone that Sarasota County has had a leadership. Catherine, are you driving this, or is Jean? Jean, you can go one more slide. On this slide, what I want to do is remind people that Sarasota County has been a leader in water quality improvements for decades. We were the first county in the state of Florida to pass a fertilizer ordinance, the first county in the state of Florida to have a stormwater environmental utility. We had one of the most robust land acquisition programs of any county in the state of Florida, in a state that has one of the most active land acquisition programs in the nation, or at least it did up until about 10 years ago. So we have made a lot of historic gains because of these decades of investments from many generations. And that's resulted in us seeing for a while an increase in seagrasses and an improvement in water quality. So today, specifically, on the next slide, what I'd like to do is ask the question, why are we worried about these excess nutrients? And there's a lot of scientific ways that I can use to explain this, but I want to kind of keep this at a level that I can understand it, because I know that's a level that you'll be able to understand it as well. We know that as these nutrients that are increased because of human activity get into these waterways, it causes changes in many of these water quality parameters, such as the amount of oxygen in the water, the amount of light that can get down to the seagrasses, the presence of these macroalgae that attach themselves to seagrass beds and kill them off. But the reason that we need to worry about these nutrients is because as humans, we are now putting more nutrients into these natural systems than the natural systems can absorb or utilize from and still stay healthy. So if you think about the term sequestration for just a moment, that's a term that you typically hear associated with carbon. We're putting far too much carbon in our atmosphere for the atmosphere to be able to sequester or to be able to process that. And so carbon, just like nutrients, something that is absolutely critical and essential to life in all forms as we know it on the planet, becomes something not of life-giving, but of life-threatening. And that's what's happening with the nutrients. We are putting so many nutrients in the waterway that the natural system that used to sequester or process or digest these nutrients can no longer do so. And as a result, the system is literally choking to death on too much food. The next slide shows you one of the indicators that we look at for this excess nutrient, for these phosphorus and these other chlorophylls that get into the bays and cause us the decline in the water quality parameters that we look at. And here you can see for a while, we saw a great increase in seagrass bed coverage of the Sarasota Bay system. And when I say Sarasota Bay system, I'm talking about all the way north from Palmasola Bay, Sarasota Bay, Roberts Bay, Little Sarasota Bay, Blackburn Bay, and Lemon Bay. But what we've seen recently, as these nitrogen levels continue to increase, we're now starting to see the water quality indicators go in the other direction. And chlorophyll is, of course, one of these that is the most threatening. So what we thought we would be able to do with this water quality playbook is to look at these activities that humans are doing that are causing these upticks in nutrients in our waterway, and give the community activities on what can we do to correct it. And on the next slide, this kind of tells you the purpose of the playbook. Purpose of the playbook. Excuse me. The picture threw me off there. And the purpose of this playbook is to draw attention to these nutrients and to cause the community to get excited, if you would, and activate themselves to do something. So what we did at Gulf Coast, with the help of the Shafers, is we convened all of the experts that have the daily working knowledge of water pollution in Sarasota County. That includes the Gulf of Mexico, the Bay systems, and also these Blackwater creeks. We got people from county government that work in wastewater, people in county government that work in stormwater. We got people from the city of Sarasota. We got stormwater managers from the private sector who work with developers. We got people from the agricultural industry. We got scientists that understand the biology, all this. And we basically sat them down in a room and locked the door, fed them pizza, and wouldn't let them out until we brainstormed every potential idea that we believe is causing these nutrient increases and resulting in these water quality degradations in Sarasota County. We then went back to the Shafers and a gentleman named Steve Swaw, all very talented people, to put together this playbook. We took it back to the group, took it to the permitting agencies and said, what do you think of it? Everybody loved the idea because it gave us all good reason to be active. It gave us all good reason to do something right to increase the water quality in our area. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Shafer, and she's going to go into a little bit more detail about the playbook and how it can help you there on Siesta Key. Jennifer?
Thank you, John. And thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. As John so eloquently described, this was a large group effort. And so bottom line, we came up with a powerful curated collection of actionable community-wide nutrient management activities. So I want to tell you a little bit about the playbook, what's in it, how it's organized. Let's start with the goals of the playbook. It's organized around 3 goals, and I'm going to follow counterclockwise. The first goal is to reduce nutrients by managing the inputs, and nitrogen is our primary concern. Jean, next slide. And we'd reduce those inputs from fertilizer, biosolids, wastewater, septic systems, and surprisingly, engine emissions as well. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Second, we want to remove active nitrogen from the soil and water, primarily by locking it up long-term in plants and animals, and also restoring and enhancing the ability of nature to do its job. The bacteria in soil and water can convert active nitrogen back into a gaseous form that goes right up into the atmosphere and is inert and harmless. And next slide, we do that with land conservation. Oops, go back one, please. Species restoration, green infrastructure. Back one, please. You can use the arrows on your keyboard as well. Okay, there we go. Looking to the left side, the strategies to remove nitrogen, there we go, land conservation, species restoration, green infrastructure, and stormwater BMPs. Then the third goal is to build capacity and resilience around our communities, around our science, around our policy. We want to be able to sustain these water quality improvements. We do that through education and incentives, partnerships, better data, and public policy. All right, next slide. So what's in the playbook? Let's take a closer look. The playbook integrates 43 specific community-wide activities across 10 topics. And we looked at all of these possible solutions holistically on a watershed level. The strategies were identified, as Jon described, through facilitated in-depth discussions with our local experts and practitioners, and then further developed through research, data analysis, and expert interviews. So as you can see by just scanning this list, the breadth and depth of the 43 activities proposed by our committee left no stone unturned. Some are easy, some are hard, some cost a few thousand, some millions. And they're all laid out in an easy to navigate website, which is shown here as a sitemap.
How do I increase the audio on this one?
To support first steps and foster implementation, each activity provides relevant and helpful information to get started, including why it needs to be done, the context, both historical and regulatory, the key players, status quo, and then ends with some specific steps, an approach with key steps for implementation, plus resources, experts to consult, other similar leading programs, websites, reports, etc., and performance measures and rough cost estimates. And for our scientists, educators, and policymakers looking for activities specific to their wheelhouse, the playbook activities are also keyed to the 3 approaches: science, policy, or education. So throughout the website, you can navigate by goal, you can navigate by your approach, you can navigate by topic to fully explore these 43 activities. Next slide. So here the 10 playbook chapters are shown in a watershed perspective. And in fact, this graphic serves as the visual navigation into the playbook. So you can kind of have a sense of where in the watershed these issues are arising and where in the watershed can we apply solutions. Many of the nutrient management strategies focus on harnessing nature to help rebalance the nitrogen cycle, restoring and supporting natural lands and wildlife. And where that's not possible, installing green infrastructure is probably the most effective way to take nitrogen off the menu for harmful algae. Other strategies require new and improved technologies, such as upgrading wastewater treatment plants to advanced treatment. For example, the Bee Ridge wastewater treatment plant is undergoing a renovation to advanced wastewater treatment, and that's going to remove 6 times more nitrogen from the treated effluent, 6 times as much nitrogen that won't be able to contaminate the environment. There are also technologies for upgrading septic systems. Septic systems are typically designed for public health in mind, but treating nitrogen, reducing nitrogen to an inactive form, not their strong suit. By adding nitrogen treatment components to septic systems, we can reduce nitrogen by 90 or 95% more than a traditional septic system. Cleaning up stormwater. That's really important, especially for the barrier islands. This also requires changing our behavior, adopting more sustainable practices with regard to fertilizer and soil management, picking up pet waste, things like that. Finally, a significant source of nitrogen loading that gets less attention is a phenomenon known as atmospheric deposition. It's basically when pollution particles from the burning of fossil fuels in gas-powered engines that rains back down onto the land and to the water, carrying nitrogen oxides with it, which then obviously contributes excess nitrogen to the land where it washes off and directly to the water. So we need to clean up the air, clean up our water by shifting away from gas-powered equipment and vehicles. I'll touch on this in a moment. So let's continue. I want to present a couple of examples so you can get a sense of what's in the playbook. I'll use 3 examples of playback activities that I thought were relevant to Siesta Key. The primary source of nutrient loading from Siesta Key is polluted runoff, stormwater runoff. And that just washes whatever happens on the land into the waterways. So the first thing I want to talk about is fertilizer. We collected some data from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, which tracks the distribution of fertilizer all over the state, where fertilizer is produced and where it is sold wholesale. And we learned that in Sarasota County in 2019, 52% of that fertilizer was distributed for use on golf courses and athletic fields. But relevant to residential lands, 28% of it, almost a third, is used on lawns. So Florida newcomers, they're always coming, and they often bring with them landscaping expectations that really are a poor fit for Florida ecology, especially for our barrier islands. And what makes it worse is that sometimes HOA requirements can exacerbate these unsuitable landscape practices. For example, HOAs may require residents to maintain turf grass all the way down to the water's edge, instead of promoting low maintenance ground covers and a fertilizer-free natural fringe along the waterfronts. Many residents are unaware of proper fertilizer use or even what treatments their landscape companies may be using on their properties. So ongoing education is needed about the value of native and Florida-friendly landscapes. As you all probably are aware, they require less work, less fertilizer, less irrigation to maintain. And we need to continue education on Sarasota County's fertilizer ordinance, which has a summer ban on the application of nitrogen-containing fertilizers and requires all commercial fertilizer applicators to take a course and get certified. So if you have a commercial company doing your lawn for you, they should have a certification sticker on the outside of their truck. Many people don't know that. They don't know to look for that. Another way that we might improve the performance of residential properties is to prepare model language for fertilizer management that can serve as an educational tool for HOAs and homeowners. So if there's a way that these can be incorporated into HOA bylaws, it will provide leverage for those homeowners to advocate for environmentally friendly and, by the way, less expensive options. All right, next slide. I also want to introduce you to the issue of atmospheric deposition, which I mentioned earlier. There's actually little awareness among the general public that air quality does affect water quality. Local sources like cars and leaf blowers, lawn mowers, etc., they can contribute 4 times more to the local loading of nitrogen in watersheds than, for example, regional power plants. In fact, we dug up some really interesting statistics. Minute for minute, a 30 cc 4-stroke leaf blower emits about 6 times more nitrogen oxides than a Ford F-150 pickup. You can run a lawnmower for a half an hour and it's the same as driving a car 300 miles. So it's pretty significant. So we need improved understanding of the link between air quality and water quality and environmental and human health, by the way, especially with regard to motor vehicles and lawn care equipment. And so this may be a catalyst for better transportation planning. So to curb vehicle emissions, for example, we should continue our local electric vehicle initiatives. We should incentivize electric vehicles for car rentals, for example. Drive Electric Orlando has a program that does just that. For gas-powered equipment, we could look at incentives for upgrading or trading in the dirty gas-powered lawn equipment for cleaner, quieter electric equipment. California has a program called Mow Down Air Pollution that does just that. We could connect the emissions to health concerns, thereby motivating people to trade in their equipment. Again, there's a program in the San Francisco Bay Area called Spare the Air that tries to protect human health, especially around schools and hospitals. And finally, we can always continue to promote Florida-friendly landscaping to replace grass with ground cover that doesn't have to be mowed, doesn't have to be trimmed every single week during the summer months. All right, the last example relates directly to the capture and treatment of stormwater. So the majority actually of privately owned, developed coastal properties lack stormwater treatment altogether. So in newer communities built after the mid-1980s, master stormwater systems were required. So we've got 50,000 acres in Sarasota County of older residential neighborhoods that were built out prior to the requirement for master stormwater treatment. So it just runs right off the property into a gutter, down a storm drain, and right into the bay. Now for homeowners, the resources and the technical assistance to do better to capture that stormwater, retain it, clean it, that can be costly, confusing, piecemeal. So we propose that we should increase the capacity of our existing programs, Sarasota County, the UFIFS Extension, the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program, to consult with homeowners and provide cost share grants to help them make improvements in their neighborhoods. There could be a program such as one is being discussed at Sarasota County right now to target certain older neighborhoods that have known pollution problems and to have cost share incentives, for example, converting driveways to pervious pavers. So a collaborative one-stop shop for neighborhoods to get help with the design, permitting, funding, and installation questions might be a good idea to sort of reduce the barrier or the burden of trying to figure it all out on their own. So those are just 3 examples from the playbook of issues that are relevant to CS2Key. Last slide, please. And I just want to take a moment to credit again Jon Thaxton of the Gulf Coast Community Foundation for bringing this talented group together and inviting David and I and our co-author Steve Swaw to embark on this really super interesting research project. It's been really rewarding to put this together. The playbook then is what we think is the first such comprehensive, detailed, locally calibrated nutrient management strategy to be implemented really for use across the community. It's not just a government document. It's not just a document for philanthropy or homeowners. There's something in there for everyone. And it focuses and prioritizes and coordinates our community activity and philanthropy in order for us to all make water quality gains together. So I want to direct you to waterqualityplaybook.org, where you can check out all 43 nutrient management strategies and learn all you ever wanted to know about the issue. John and I, I'm sure, can take your questions.
Hi.
I may unmute myself and see if there were any in the chat room. If you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and put something in the chat room. Catherine, you have your hand up. Go ahead and go.
I think one of the big issues for a lot of us now is with so much new construction that's going on, even though they have a lot of new guidelines and requirements. What should new commercial construction, for example, use in terms of stormwater vaults? Is there some science on that in terms of reducing the load on our canals and some of the water, I guess what you say, the pipelines that are out there for runoff? That's one of the things that seems to be coming up quite a lot, is that they get permits to build, but then they find out after the fact that the pipelines are filled and they have to have a vault. But how do you get them to comply with that? I mean, that's a question. Thank you.
So I can try that if you want, Jennifer. One of the things that we discovered in our playbook research was several years ago, about 15 years ago, a group of stormwater managers were convened, 2 experts from each of the water management districts in the state of Florida, to take a different focus on stormwater. Most of the stormwater design that you see is viewed through the lens of what we call water quantity. Most people call that flooding. In other words, we're trying to capture the water so it doesn't flood. Now, as a result of retaining water and preventing flooding, there are some environmental gains that result from that. But what this group was charged with doing was looking at commercial development and residential development, redevelopment and new construction, about how we can better design these stormwater systems to improve water quality. Unfortunately, the governor elected at that time felt that that was going to be an impediment to the economy, development, and business. And so they took this document that was well researched and just kind of put it on the shelf, and it's never been heard from again. We're suggesting that that document be revived and re-looked at, because just as you said, Catherine, stormwater vaults are able to make the water quantity guidelines, but frankly, it's doubtful if they're able, if the discharge is really going to meet the standards that this community would want to set if it knew the impacts to water quality and nutrients and things like that that are not going to be absorbed, sequestered, or otherwise neutralized in a concrete vault. And I can tell you, after reviewing many of these permits as a county commissioner, and this goes true with stormwater ponds too, all stormwater systems work really good the day you put them in for the design that they were designed to do. But 10, 15, 20 years later, if they have not had
Upgrade.
maintenance and capital upgrades, they're failing. These systems are failing all across Sarasota County, not just vaults, but also the ponds. They're failing for under many parameters, but they were never even designed to focus on nutrients and water pollution so much. So we are suggesting that we take a fresh look at these guidelines, because we can look at the guidelines today, and a developer could say legitimately that they are meeting the standards. Well, maybe we need to look at the standards again and see if they meet the community's expectations.
I really appreciate that. I was really happy. One really good thing that happened with our park here on Public Beach Park was there was an initial plan when they were doing flood management for the roadway by the park and trying to improve that. They did a great job. Their first thought was to put the water that came off that surface area directly into a pipe and put it into the Grand Canal.
I remember.
I know you do. And I remember thinking, but that doesn't go anywhere. How's that going to be good for all the people that live there? That was my, and not knowing all the things that I'm more aware of now. And we pretty well protested that. And the county did a very wise thing, not only with the stormwater pond, but with the flushing and the aeration. And then they took it about 1,000 feet. At that point, I think it's 1,000 feet. I want to say 2, but I think at least 1,000 and maybe more out into the Gulf after it had been aerated and UV treated. Now, I don't know really and filtered, what it does at that point, but at least it didn't go into the Grand Canal because of very limited flow and water change. So That was one good thing. And I guess I'd want to keep doing more good things like that. So what do you think we need to do
Well,
to get
that
that
was
help?
that was only a good thing because it was the best of a lot of terrible things.
I see.
Right. If we had the capacity, water such as that should be run through a sewer treatment plant so that it becomes more benign and inert to the natural environment.
Got it.
Jacques Cousteau said the solution to pollution is not dilution.
Yeah, I noticed that in some smaller pools I'm around.
Okay, I have another question from Steve. Did you want to ask it, Stephen, or do you want me to? Okay, the question is, how can septic tanks and drain fields be improved to reduce nitrogen release?
So I'm going to let Jennifer answer that one. But
Okay.
before we do answer it, one of the lessons that we learned in this research that we did, and this was, I cannot tell you how much research was done to put this together because we wanted the best science out there. We learned my rule, or at least my motto, is all septic tanks are not created equal. Those septic tanks that are older, that have drain fields close to the water table and are in close proximity to a surface water, those are the culprits that are causing the ecological harm. Many of the septic tanks in Sarasota County are not in any of those three categories. And so this idea that all septic tanks are bad and they all need to be removed is not the most cost-effective way for either protecting human health or the health of the water with regards to nutrients. So we have directed the county and other to look at the data and map those septic systems that meet those three criteria. Again, close to the water table, distance from the surface water, and the age, and focus on those first to do the things such as replacement or improvements to the septic tanks that Jennifer can tell you about.
Okay.
Sure, thanks. So the question was, how do you improve an existing septic
Right.
tank and drain field?
Right.
And I think the core thing to understand is that to treat nitrogen, you have to have some biology going on. It's the action of several different types of bacteria that take that nitrogen through different stages in the presence of oxygen, not in the presence of oxygen, wet, dry, etc. So the design of a septic system doesn't get very far in treating nitrogen by the time it gets to the drain field. The second part of treating nitrogen is when the water leaches out of that drain field and into underlying soils and travels wherever it might go, hopefully not into a water body, and encounters organic material and bacteria. So we want to, when we're upgrading a septic system to treat nitrogen, not just get rid of the bacteria, but treat the nutrients, we have to add some biology. And so you can do that by adding in the line of flow a biofiltration system that creates the biological conditions for bacteria to do their work, to turn that active nitrogen, ammonia, and nitrates into inert nitrogen gas. One really interesting thing that Steve Swall, our co-author, is researching and testing right now, in fact, is a feature called a Biotrench. It goes by a number of different names, but basically you dig a trench in the line of flow from your septic drain field, fill that trench with some rich biological biodegradable material like sawdust or wood chips. And the bacteria naturally grow in that. And as the water from your septic drain field flows through that trench full of active bacteria, it can actually break down that nitrogen, turn it into gas, and finish that process. And it's a really inexpensive option as compared to, for example, adding another tank to your septic treatment system, or even converting that septic system to centralized wastewater, which means now you have to have capacity at a wastewater treatment plant and worry about the effluent there. So you're almost just moving the problem around. So those are some really interesting findings. If you click over to the chapter on septic systems, you'll see a full explanation there with some graphics that'll show you where you can add those
Okay.
enhancements.
Thank you. We do have a few. I understand we still have a few in the southern part of our key, but we luckily haven't run into them around our canal. So that's the good news. The one thing I wanted to ask, that's why I left us on this activity 7.2, the stormwater. We are notorious on our key when we have storms for the amount of water that ends up in our canal road that goes into the canal. And we do have a problem with salinity around that particular area. In other words, this fresh water is not making it conducive to support sea life as well. Any thoughts of what we can do with that?
Sure, John, you want me to take this?
No, I'm going to let you start on this one. You're the scientist.
Well, for residential properties, it's all about doing whatever you can to get that water to soak into the ground. And as Catherine mentioned earlier, that becomes more and more of a problem as you build larger and larger impervious surface on your lots. So adding cistern, diverting your downspouts from your driveway, put it into the grass or into shell, softening all of your surfaces, get rid of your concrete driveways and sidewalks and convert them to pervious materials. So it's really about trying to reduce the total volume really there's nowhere else for it to go. I think one of the innovations that we'd be looking for in the future is rainwater harvesting,
right?
That would allow us to reuse that precious resource instead of just wasting it.
Right. Great for our lawns. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Is there anyone else? I have one more. I see one more chat. Okay. Look, it says something about with everything going, you're proposing to go electric motor. Where's the electricity coming from? We don't have any public spots here on the key to plug in. So what have you thought about like that for electrical vehicles?
With regard to charging stations?
Yes.
Well, you get solar on the top of your house and then you plug it in your garage.
Right.
I think one of the concerns here was that that we not experience some of the blackouts that they saw in Texas and California, and those are network infrastructure issues, really not related to electric motors or electric cars. A lot of these electric appliances are chargeable during the off hours of peak use, when electricity is made and just lost because the power companies have to keep making so much in order to keep all of their systems working. So a lot of the electric cars and a lot of the charging can be done in between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning when there's nowhere near as much electric use. But the problem in Texas and California has to do with networking much more than it does with the conversion to electric motors or electric appliances. Mm-hmm. And they're very unfortunate what happened in both of those cases, but they're by and large have been demonstrated to be unrelated.
Right. Issue. Correct. Okay. Anything else, guys? Anybody else? What,
I guess I would like to make a very strong recommendation that you you're not up to speed with the latest issues on this science. And I've spent the last 10 years in it, and I guarantee you the statement you just made about what was going on in Texas is not correct. Also, when you're dealing with nitrogen, it's a criteria pollutant, as I'm sure you know. And so it's being regulated. And in fact, the generally speaking, across this entire country, our criteria pollutions have come down dramatically and are continuing to go down. So just be a little careful tying everything you're doing, which, by the way, your objectives, I'm on this key since '64, and I totally agree with your objectives. And I agree with a lot of what you said, but I'd be very careful of tying yourself so fundamentally to going pure electric and so forth. There's I'd suggest you take a look at a lot of work being done with the Manhattan Institute. And if you're interested in some other information relative to some of the things you've said, don't hesitate to contact me. I'd be glad to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Jim, I don't have your contact information, but maybe Catherine.
Yeah, she does. She does.
Can get it to us because
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, your motives are wonderful. Just
yeah.
I'm
Well,
just
the reason-
warning you, be careful about this.
I get it. No, I consider the criticism constructive. And the reason that we made this playbook electronic is so that if we have the science wrong or if conditions change, we can change what we put in there. And that's the reason that this is not a stagnant document. That's the reason we chose to go electronic with it. So we could take inputs such as you may have, and any credible criticism, we will make adjustments as necessary, because the last thing that we want is to have a small inconsistency over here, which then casts a doubt on all the good science that we have over here, right?
Yeah, that is absolutely, that's exactly, thank you for your constructive response. That's exactly the reason I brought it up. I brought the matter up. I'd be happy to provide you all sorts of relevant references. I happen to be the guy who ran one of the biggest R&D programs ever to bring NOx down from U.S. automobiles and trucks. And as a result of that research project, we don't see diesel anymore, because we tried all kinds of technology to be able to have diesel engines, and particularly in trucks, in light duty trucks, and we just couldn't do it. We couldn't meet it. So now,
Right.
you know, but with gasoline, with very cheap bolt-on emission control, we have very, very, very low NOx emissions, very low emissions coming out of gasoline engines.
Okay.
So your lawnmower, there's no reason why you can't reduce NOx with a lawnmower if you decided it was really worth it.
Okay, Jim, I'll take the to-do to get your information to John and Jennifer. And
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Sure.
Okay. So John, we're going to go to the next. I would love for you to stay if you have time, but I understand if you don't, we're going to go to the next step. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Good job.